Have you ever wondered how safe you really are, even inside the walls of a luxury apartment with guards, cameras, and high-profile neighbors? In Hyderabad, India's Pearl City, there stood a high-rise society called Swan Lake Apartments, an address known for wealth, power, and the kind of security that should make crime impossible. Every floor was lined with CCTV cameras, gates were guarded around the clock, and not a single person could enter or leave without being noticed. And yet, inside one of these towers, a crime unfolded so chilling and so brutal that it shattered the illusion of safety for everyone who lived there. On the 13th floor, in apartment 1331, lived the Agarwal family. Rakesh Agarwal was the head of the house, a businessman dealing in steel, well known in the Sanathnagar market. With him lived his wife, Renu Agarwal, and their two children, Shubham and Tamana. Shubham stayed with them and worked alongside his father, while Tamana studied outside the state. The family had money, reputation, and comfort, everything you might associate with success. But beneath this polished life, something sinister was quietly making its way into their home. The Agarwals' daily routine was predictable. Every morning, Rakesh and Shubham left for their shop, while Renu, who was about 50 years old and often unwell, stayed home alone. Their daughter was away, and most days the apartment was unusually quiet. Like many women of her age, Renu spent her hours managing the endless little chores of the house, things that pile up and never seem to end. Neighbors rarely interfered in each other's lives. The walls of these apartments were soundproof and privacy was absolute. Nobody ever really knew what went on behind another family's door. But Renu wasn't entirely alone. The family had recently hired a house help through an online agency, the same kind their relatives on the 14th floor had used. The relative's helper had been with them for nearly a year, and now Renu had one of her own. The boy seemed polite, hard-working, and efficient, always on time, always smiling. He blended into the rhythm of the household so quickly that nobody questioned his presence. After all, who would suspect danger from the very person trusted to serve tea, clean floors, and run errands? The date was September 10th, 2025, a Wednesday that began like any other. At around 10:30 a.m., Rakesh and Shubham left home for their shop. Renu remained behind as usual while the house help busied himself with small chores. The day appeared ordinary, but it was anything but. Hours passed in silence until evening arrived, and at around 5 o'clock p.m., something strange began to unfold. A relative from the 14th floor called Shubham. She had been trying to reach her own helper but could not get through. Worried, she asked Shubham to check with his own house help. But when Shubham dialed, the call went straight to switched off. That was unusual. Their helper was always reachable. To make things worse, when Shubham tried calling his mother Renu, she didn't answer either. He tried again and again, but the line remained silent. His mother had a habit. If she was busy, she would always call back later. But this time, the silence stretched on. Shubham grew uneasy and told his father. Together they waited, convincing themselves that maybe Renu was busy. Maybe she had stepped away from her phone. But as minutes turned into hours, their unease grew into dread. By 6:30 p.m., Rakesh decided to return home. He rang the doorbell. No response. He knocked harder and harder, but the apartment remained silent. He tried to unlock the door with his key, but it was bolted from the inside. Where was Renu? Why was her phone dead silent? Desperation set in. Rakesh called the building officials for help. A plumber named Chidambar Guru was summoned. With ropes and support, he climbed down from the 14th floor balcony to the 13th. Most balconies in such high-rises were never locked. Who would ever think an intruder could reach them? And in a society this secure, why bother? As the plumber slipped through the balcony door, what he saw made his heart stop. His scream echoed through the apartment, sending chills down everyone's spine. The door was finally forced open. Inside, lying on the floor of the living room, was Renu Agarwal. Her hands and feet were tied with rope. Blood stained the furniture, the floor, even a pressure cooker that sat nearby. The signs of struggle were everywhere. Marks of sharp weapons, blows from heavy objects. The once neat and soundproof apartment had turned into a silent crime scene. Rakesh, stunned, collapsed on the spot, while the neighbors, officials, and soon the police rushed in. The crime shook the building like an earthquake. How could something so horrifying happen inside a fortress of cameras, guards, and security checks? Fear spread among the other families. If Renu could be killed in her own living room, then was anyone truly safe? Police sealed off the scene. Forensic teams moved in, and reporters began to swarm outside. A nightmare had just begun. One that would expose shocking truths hidden behind closed doors. But the most chilling part was still unanswered. Who had done this, and how had they walked away unnoticed? The police sealed the Agarwal apartment within minutes. Flashing lights, uniformed officers, and forensic experts flooded the quiet CT. Orators of Swan Lake Apartments. Neighbors whispered in shock, staring at the once welcoming home now transformed into a crime scene. Renu's lifeless body had been sent for post-mortem, but her absence lingered in the air like a ghost. Questions multiplied. Was this a robbery gone wrong, or something far more sinister? The investigators knew one thing for certain: this was no ordinary crime. The brutality of the attack, the ropes, the multiple weapons, it reeked of planning and rage. Detectives moved through each room with precision. Wardrobes were left wide open, drawers pulled out, valuables missing. Jewelry, cash, and even personal items like watches and phones were gone. But the strangest part was the contrast. The family's locker, filled with wealth, was untouched. Someone had tried to open it but failed, leaving behind clear marks of forced entry. It seemed the killers wanted fast money and didn't have time to break through heavy locks. Yet the chaos suggested more than just robbery. Why tie Renu up, torture her, and use so many weapons when silence alone could have bought them enough time? The forensic team gathered everything: fingerprints on furniture, blood-stained clothes left near the bathroom, shoe impressions on the polished floor. Those clothes weren't Renu's. They belonged to someone else, possibly the killers themselves. That detail sent a shiver through the investigators. Whoever had committed the crime had changed into fresh clothes inside the house, calmly showered and walked out, leaving their stained garments behind. Such behavior wasn't just cold-blooded, it was fearless. Whoever they were, they had no concern about getting caught. By now, suspicion began circling around the one category of people who had easiest access to the house helps. Families in the building often hired maids and helpers from outside states through agencies, and two of them, Renu's newly hired boy and the 14th floor's longtime helper, were both missing. Their phones were off, their belongings gone. Could it be a coincidence that both disappeared the very same day? The police doubted it. In fact, their instincts screamed that these two weren't just suspects, they were the key to the entire case. To confirm this, detectives turned to the society's greatest strength, its CCTV network. Camera after camera was reviewed, every frame examined, and then at precisely 5:03 p.m., a chilling scene appeared. Two young men walked out of the Agarwal apartment. Their faces weren't fully clear in the corridor, but their build and movement were recognizable. They carried a heavy bag, their expressions shockingly calm. One even paused at the door to change his sandals before walking toward the elevator. That small act, so ordinary, so casual, sent chills down the officers' spines. It was as if they weren't walking away from a murder, but from an errand. The elevator camera gave police what they needed: faces, clear, undeniable faces. They were indeed the missing house helps, Roshan Singh, who had been working upstairs for almost a year, and Harsh Kumar, who had only joined the Agarwals 10 days earlier. Both were from Jharkhand, both had access, both had the trust of the families, and now both were missing, vanishing, with bags stuffed with stolen valuables. The footage also revealed something even more disturbing. Inside the elevator, one of them was wiping his neck with a cloth as if cleaning off traces of blood. They were neat, fresh, smiling, even chatting casually. Not a hint of fear crossed their faces. The building staff were stunned. Many of them knew Roshan and Harsh as quiet, hard-working boys. They had seen them fetch groceries, run errands, and laugh with the children. No one had imagined they were capable of such savagery. But the cameras didn't lie. Their escape continued into the parking lot, where they mounted a scooter, one of them driving, the other clutching the heavy bag. Within minutes, they rode out of the gates, waved through by security guards who assumed they were just two familiar workers going about their routine. The police wasted no time. 5 separate teams were formed, each with a different task. One was to track CCTV footage across the city, tracing where the scooter went. Another focused on call records and phone signals of both suspects. A third investigated the agency that had supplied them, while 2 more were dispatched to Jharkhand, convinced the boys might flee to their hometowns. Every lead mattered, every second counted. The city was on high alert because 2 dangerous men were now loose, and they had already proved what they were capable of. Meanwhile, anger and fear spread through the apartment complex. Families locked their doors, some even called their helpers back to their villages out of suspicion. Politicians visited, demanding answers. How could such a crime happen just 300 meters away from the ACP's office? How could boys with criminal records have been hired so easily? The trust that once bound the community was broken overnight. For the Agarwals, grief was unbearable, but the police knew their only way to offer comfort was justice. They had to catch Roshan and Harsh, and soon. Then came the breakthrough. Tracing CCTV cameras beyond the building, the scooter was spotted heading toward Hafizpet railway station. By evening, the scooter itself was found abandoned there. The suspects were now on foot, but had they boarded a train, had they fled the city, or were they hiding in plain sight just a step ahead of the police? The question left investigators restless. They had faces, they had names, but in a city of millions, Roshan and Harsh had become shadows, and shadows are hardest to catch. For 2 days, Hyderabad police chased trails across the city. Every lead, every camera, every phone signal was scrutinized. The scooter was found near Hafizpet railway station, but the killers weren't there. Investigators initially believed Roshan and Harsh had boarded a train to Ranchi, their hometown in Jharkhand, but something about their escape didn't add up. These weren't amateurs. They had showered after the murder, changed clothes, carried stolen goods in a bag, and left calmly. Would such cold-blooded men make the mistake of taking a train filled with cameras and police patrols? The detectives weren't convinced. The answer came from an unexpected source: a cab owner. On September 12th, he reported something strange. 2 young men had hired his cab, paying $15,000 in advance through online transfer. The ride? From Hyderabad to Ranchi. His driver had picked them up around 1 a.m. on September 11th. For nearly 20 hours they traveled together, stopping for meals, chatting casually. The driver hadn't thought much of it until he saw their faces splashed across Instagram, captured in the viral CCTV footage of the Swan Lake murder suspects. his blood red and cold. He realized he had unknowingly driven 2 killers across states. With this breakthrough, police moved swiftly. Teams already dispatched to Jharkhand coordinated with local officers, tracing the suspect's arrival. On the evening of September 12th, Roshan Singh and Harsh Kumar were found hiding in Ranchi with the help of a cousin named Raju Verma. Alongside them, the police recovered jewelry, cash, watches, and even the house keys they had stolen from the Agarwal apartment. Their escape, once so confident, ended quietly in handcuffs. But this arrest opened deeper, darker questions. Who really were these boys, and what had driven them to such monstrous violence? The truth was unsettling. Roshan, aged just 22, had a criminal history already. Back in Jharkhand, 3 cases were registered against him, 2 for robbery, 1 for attempted murder. Yet through an agency in Kolkata run by a man named Shankar, he had secured a job as a house help in Hyderabad's most secure society. His background hadn't been checked, his past never verified. For 11 months he had lived upstairs from the Agarwals, serving tea and cleaning rooms, all while carrying the shadow of his crimes. Trust had given him entry, silence had protected him. Harsh Kumar, just 20, was worse in another way. He was an addict sent to rehab in Kolkata before returning to his old ways. He wasn't in Hyderabad long, barely 10 days in the Agarwal home, but that was enough. He was Roshan's friend, introduced through the same agency. The Agarwals had hired him without question, believing their relative's recommendation was safe. But Harsh had walked into the house with greed already in his veins. The jewelry, the cash, the lifestyle of the wealthy family, it was never about work. For him, it was always about the loot. In the days before the murder, Roshan and Harsh began planning. On September 9th, they attended a drug party outside Hyderabad, meeting shady friends and building courage. By September 10th, their minds were made up. That morning, after Rakesh and Shubham left, Harsh stayed back, pretending to work, while Roshan slipped into the 13th floor apartment later. The 2 confronted Renu, demanding jewelry and money. When she refused, they tied her hands and feet, beat her with a pressure cooker, and stabbed her with knives and scissors. They demanded the locker password, but she never gave in. Her silence cost her life, but it also saved her family's savings. The brutality shocked even seasoned investigators. Renu had more than 40 wounds on her body. It wasn't just robbery, it was sadism. After the murder, the boys acted as if nothing had happened. They showered, changed clothes, stuffed stolen items into a bag, sprayed perfume to mask the blood, and calmly walked out. In CCTV footage, they even smiled inside the elevator, talking casually as if they had just returned from shopping. That chilling calmness, the absence of guilt, the absence of fear, was what made the case unforgettable. By September 13th, the police held a press conference, laying out every detail. Jewelry worth several lakhs, watches, mobile phones, and even perfumes were recovered. Both suspects, barely adults, now faced charges that would keep them behind bars for decades. Yet the arrest didn't erase the deeper fear left behind. How many families had trusted house helps without knowing their pasts? How many agencies had failed to verify the backgrounds of workers they sent into homes? If Roshan's record had been checked, if Rash's addiction had been flagged, would Renu still be alive? The Agarwal family, devastated, demanded justice. Politicians called for stricter verification laws, urging people never to hire without police clearance. The tragedy had become a warning for every household in the city. It wasn't just about one family or one murder. It was about a system that allowed predators to walk freely into homes under the disguise of helpers. Swan Lake Apartments, once a symbol of luxury, was now remembered for its darkest day. And so the case ended with arrests, charges, and headlines. But it left behind a haunting question for everyone watching. In a world where danger can enter your home disguised as a helping hand, how do you ever know who you can really trust?